On June 4th, 1989, a single man stood before a column of tanks in Beijing. This image became iconic worldwide except in China, where it's been completely erased. In the days before, Chinese troops fired into crowds of unarmed students with assault rifles loaded with expanding bullets, designed to maximize internal damage. Bodies were crushed under tank treads until they became, in the words of one witness, a pie. The death toll? Officially 241. Secretly, according to British intelligence, closer to 10,000. Yet today, an entire generation of Chinese citizens has no idea this massacre ever happened. This isn't just historical amnesia. It's the most successful mass censorship campaign in modern history. Welcome to the infamous past. We'll examine both the massacre itself and the extraordinary censorship campaign that followed, and explore how an entire society can be made to forget one of the most documented atrocities of the modern era. The truth can be unsettling. Subscribe to witness history as it really was. The buildup. The spark that ignited the Tiananmen protests came on April 15, 1989, with the death of Hu Yaobang, a reform-minded Communist Party official who had been forced from power for being too liberal. Students gathered in Tiananmen Square to mourn him, but their gathering quickly evolved into something more, a call for democratic reforms, freedom of speech, and an end to corruption. By mid-May, the movement had grown exponentially. Workers joined students. Government employees joined the protests. Even some military and police showed support. At its peak, over 1 million people occupied Tiananmen Square, with similar demonstrations erupting in 400 cities across China. The protesters' centerpiece was a 33-foot statue they called the Goddess of Democracy, modeled after the Statue of Liberty. For the ruling Communist Party, this American-inspired symbol was the final provocation. Behind closed doors, China's paramount leader Deng Xiaoping made his decision. The protests must be crushed, no matter the cost. What made this moment particularly volatile was the presence of international media. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev was visiting Beijing, the first Sino-Soviet summit in 30 years, and journalists from around the world were there to cover it. Instead, their cameras captured the largest pro-democracy demonstration in communist history. As tensions escalated, the government declared martial law on May 20th. The first attempt to bring troops into Beijing failed when citizens blocked the roads and convinced soldiers to turn back. This initial success gave protesters false hope. Behind the scenes, the government was planning something far more decisive. The military units that had shown sympathy were replaced with troops from remote provinces, where soldiers spoke different dialects and had no connection to Beijing's citizens. These troops were told they were fighting against counter-revolutionary riots, threatening China's stability. Many were kept isolated from news and told the protesters were violent insurgents. By June 3rd, the stage was set for what would become one of history's most brutal crackdowns on peaceful protest. The Massacre. As darkness fell on June 3rd, columns of tanks and armored personnel carriers began moving toward Tiananmen Square from all directions. What happened next was not a simple clearing operation. It was a calculated display of overwhelming force. At approximately 10:30 p.m. near the Muxidi apartment complex, troops opened fire on crowds of protesters and bystanders. They weren't firing warning shots. They were shooting directly into the masses. According to multiple witnesses, soldiers used Type 56 assault rifles loaded with expanding bullets that fragment upon impact, creating devastating internal injuries. One Beijing resident described the scene. The soldiers were shooting at anything that moved. I saw a woman holding her shopping bag shot through the head. I saw a young man on a bicycle shot in the back as he tried to flee. As the military advanced toward the square, citizens desperately tried to block their path with buses, trucks, and their own bodies. The army's response was merciless. Tanks simply rolled over the barricades, and anyone who didn't move quickly enough. According to a British diplomatic cable declassified in 2017, APCs, armored personnel carriers, ran over civilians, including those who were already wounded. The wounded were bayoneted. By midnight, troops had surrounded Tiananmen Square itself. Contrary to some reports, most students were allowed to leave the square after negotiations. But as they retreated through the streets of Beijing, many encountered soldiers who showed no such restraint. The most brutal killings occurred in the neighborhoods surrounding the square. On Chang'an Avenue, tanks pursued fleeing protesters, crushing some under their treads. According to eyewitness accounts, soldiers were ordered to clear the area of both living protesters and bodies, creating scenes of unimaginable horror. One witness described seeing tanks repeatedly run over bodies until they were, in his words, like pie, then hose down the remains into the drains. Another reported seeing soldiers shooting the wounded to ensure there were no survivors who could later testify. By dawn on June 4th, the military had complete control of Beijing. The goddess of democracy lay shattered. The square was empty except for soldiers and the evidence of violence they were already working to erase. The cover-up begins. The morning after the massacre, a single act of defiance captured the world's attention. An unidentified man carrying shopping bags stepped in front of a column of tanks leaving Tiananmen Square. When the lead tank tried to go around him, he repeatedly blocked its path. This tank man, as he became known internationally, created the most iconic image of resistance of the 20th century. But inside China, a different story was already being constructed. On June 5th, the government released its official narrative. A small number of counter-revolutionary rioters had attacked soldiers, forcing them to defend themselves. The death toll, they claimed, was around 200, mostly soldiers. The reality was dramatically different. According to a secret British diplomatic cable sent on June 5th and declassified in 2017, a Chinese military source reported the actual death toll was at least 10,000. The cable described soldiers of the 27th Army as being particularly brutal. They were ordered to spare no one. 27 army officers were told to shoot to kill. The government's cover-up was immediate and comprehensive. Hospitals were ordered not to report death tolls. Families were forbidden from publicly mourning their dead. Foreign journalists were expelled or had their footage confiscated. Chinese media was given strict instructions on how to report the events. But the most extraordinary aspect of the cover-up was yet to come. The Chinese government didn't just want to control the narrative. They wanted to erase the event entirely from national consciousness. In the weeks following the massacre, thousands were arrested in nationwide sweeps. Anyone who had participated in or even witnessed the protests could be detained. Some received long prison sentences. Others simply disappeared. The message was clear. Speaking about Tiananmen meant severe consequences. This wasn't just about punishing participants. It was about creating a climate of fear so pervasive that self-censorship would become automatic. The strategy worked with chilling efficiency. The Great Forgetting. What makes the Tiananmen Square massacre unique in modern history isn't just the brutality of the crackdown. It's the extraordinary success of the government's campaign to erase it from collective memory. Today, an entire generation of Chinese citizens has grown up with no knowledge of what happened. The event is not taught in schools. It doesn't appear in history books. It's not mentioned in the media. The Chinese term for June 4th is one of the most heavily censored phrases on the Chinese internet. The government's censorship apparatus has evolved into perhaps the most sophisticated system of information control in human history. A 2019 University of Toronto study found that at least 3,237 keywords related to the Tiananmen massacre are automatically blocked on Chinese social media platforms. Even oblique references like May 35th, an alternative way to refer to June 4th, or candle, a symbol of remembrance, trigger immediate censorship. This digital wall extends beyond text. Image recognition algorithms scan for photos of the event. Facial recognition systems monitor for people who might be commemorating the anniversary. During sensitive periods like the anniversary, additional human sensors are deployed to catch anything the algorithms miss. The few who do learn about Tiananmen and attempt to commemorate it face severe consequences. In 2021, Hong Kong activist Chow Hang-tung was sentenced to 15 months in prison, simply for encouraging people to light candles in remembrance. In mainland China, the punishment would be even harsher. Perhaps most disturbing is how this censorship has created two parallel realities. Outside China, the Tiananmen massacre is considered one of the defining events of the late 20th century. Inside China, it's as if it never happened. When Chinese students study abroad and encounter information about Tiananmen for the first time, many experience profound psychological shock. Some refuse to believe it, dismissing it as Western propaganda. Others experience a crisis of identity, forced to reconcile their understanding of their country with this new information. This mass amnesia represents something unprecedented in the modern era. Not just the control of information, but the engineering of memory itself. Historical engineering. The Tiananmen Square massacre and its subsequent erasure from Chinese consciousness represents one of the most successful campaigns of historical engineering ever conducted. What makes this case particularly relevant today is how it foreshadowed our current struggles with information manipulation. The success of China's censorship campaign also challenges our assumptions about truth. We often believe that facts eventually prevail, that the truth cannot be suppressed forever. But the Tiananmen case suggests otherwise. An entire generation has grown up without knowledge of a massively documented historical event that happened in their own capital city. How do we preserve historical truth in an era where technology makes both documentation and censorship easier than ever before? And perhaps most importantly, how do we ensure that never forget doesn't become never knew? What other historical events do you think are being systematically erased or manipulated today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this exploration valuable, subscribe to our channel for more examinations of history's darkest and forgotten chapters.